there'd been enough ryegrass go to seed in that period of time that when we prepared the field ready, there was plenty of ryegrass across the field that had come up. So not a good outcome, but a good place for a trial.
Welcome back to the VEGALOGUE podcast, a dialogue about the Australian vegetable industry from AUSVEG. I'm Tom Bicknell. Annual ryegrass is one of the most costly weeds for the Australian ag industry. It's a major problem in grain crops and it causes significant issues in horticulture as well. For many years, farmers have relied on herbicides to control ryegrass, but in Australia, the weed has now evolved resistance to multiple chemistries, particularly post-emergents like glyphosate. The prevalence of herbicide resistance in ryegrass populations varies around the country. Across southern Australia, the Grains Research and Development Corporation cites a range of 1 to 93% for post-emergent herbicide resistance, but only 0 to 32% for pre-emergents. That lower resistance to pre-emergent herbicides prompted Tim Groom of Tasmanian onion grower Wynyon to explore which pre-emergents might work well for an onion crop in concert with an integrated weed management approach. Thank you very much for joining me, Tim.
Thank you, Tom.
Could you maybe talk us through the challenge that onion growers are facing with ryegrass at the moment?
So ryegrass has been used as a pasture species and also as a green manure crop. So there's ryegrass in our cropping system that over a period of years where it's been exposed to what are now called Group 1 herbicides has developed some resistance. It varies from farm to farm and from paddock to paddock, but it's certainly increasing. And Group 1 herbicides are currently the only tool we have in our armoury to control ryegrass in onion crops. They're also the same tool that's used in a variety of other crops in the same, on the same farm in different parts of the rotation. So ryegrass is getting exposed to these herbicides over and over again. There's a very low level of resistance in the natural population, and what we're doing is a selective breeding program where the susceptible grasses get killed out, the not susceptible grasses survive, they go to seed, that seed spreads, it spreads from various means, and we end up with a bigger problem.
So you've done some trials yourself. You started these a few years ago to try and explore some options with ryegrass control. Could you maybe tell us about how that trial project got started and what you were looking for?
Yeah, so that started from having a crop failure where we basically lost a paddock of onions due to ryegrass, effectively lost it, or that was very poor yield because of ryegrass. So I was determined to see whether there were solutions out there that we could find, and I guess from my point of view, from the herbicide path initially. I came across a guy by the name of Michael McPherson, who at the time was working for Imtrade. He's back working for Imtrade again now, who had a lot of experience in broadacre control of ryegrass. And his advice was that we needed to try and find a pre-emergent herbicide in onions that was active on ryegrass that didn't hurt the onions. So I think the first sort of set of trials I did was back in 2018. Nothing sort of looked that promising. Had another go at it the following year. Similar thing. What I thought might have worked, and it's on the label to work in cereals for ryegrass, didn't control the ryegrass well enough. And then in 2023, again, following ongoing crop failures or part failures due to ryegrass, Bree Howe and I had a more serious trial of our own bat that we put down looking at a range of pre-emergent herbicides, some which are already registered onions that have ryegrass on the label, but they don't work well enough, and other products that have the potential to control ryegrass in onions because they were used overseas. So I knew they should be safe on onions. They had activity on grass. And then a couple of sort of long shots where there was some new ryegrass herbicides registered in cereals, and thought, well, let's see what they do. So 2023, that was a replicated block trial at Caprona at Ellenton Pastoral. And the only thing that sort of had activity on ryegrass to any decent degree was too hard on the onions, and everything else that we tried was basically, ineffective at the end of the day. So the next step there was AUSVEG, through the VEGNet program, and held a field day at Boat Harbour at George Griffin's property, where we talked about ryegrass. Sarmeen had already introduced me to Peter Boutsalis, who's a specialist in ryegrass as a weed in Australia. I showed Peter and Sarmeen the trial at Caprona, and following sort of ongoing discussions, Peter suggested that we should try and look at whether we could mix one of the group ones, which is clethodim, with a range of pre-emergents, but put it on very early post-emergents, because it should be safer to the onions, and it may sort of spike up the clethodim. So that's what we've done in 2024-25. So the first step of that was Peter screened a whole range of different herbicides that were active on ryegrass in pot trials on onions to see whether they were safe to onions at the sort of flag to half a true leaf stage. There was a list of herbicides that didn't cut it because they weren't safe enough. The ones that looked good enough is what we took to the trial. So at David and Nadine Vertigan's property in 24, we put down a trial where we had a range of what we would normally call pre-emergent herbicides, but applied early post-emergents. They were running in one direction, and then we had clethodim running in the other direction to see whether we could see any positive interactions.
What was the paddock that you were doing the trial on? What was the history there?
So that had onions in, I think the last time it had onions, it was in 2018 from memory. There was a small amount of ryegrass on the edge of the paddock that we suspected to be resistant, but it wasn't really a problem. And then since then, it's had other crops in it. It's had potatoes, it's had poppies, it's had wheat, it's had canola. It had just come out of canola, and clearly there'd been enough ryegrass go to seed in that period of time that when David prepared the field ready, there was plenty of ryegrass across the field that had come up. So not a good outcome, but a good place for a trial.
I know from a broadacre perspective, they put a lot of thought and effort into controlling the weed seed load in the soil. Is that as prominent for onion growers, that thinking?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, I think if you look at the sort of work that GRDC have done, that the take-home message is at every opportunity, try and prevent ryegrass going to seed in crops. So that means where there's opportunities to control ryegrass, because you do have effective herbicides that aren't group ones, you need to use them. And then you need to use any other measures that you can come up with that will reduce or prevent ryegrass going to seed. Unfortunately, the problem with onions are that they have a very low tolerance to weeds, and including grass, because you don't need many ryegrass plants per square metre to end up with a bit of a mess. So our tolerance was fairly low. Having said that, we've got to improve on what we're doing.
In the trials in Penguin in northwest Tas, what did you find out?
So we did have some, I think you could say, promising results. So all the pre-emergent herbicides that we applied, early post-emergents, were safe to the onions. There's only really two pre-emergent herbicides on their own that had any decent activity on ryegrass. That was prosulfocarb, which is sold in many things, but it's Arcade is what we used, and Secura. Where the ryegrass pressure, because the ryegrass pressure sort of varied across the trial site, it's very difficult in a natural sort of situation to get complete uniformity of grass seed pressure. Where it was lighter, Secura looked really good. I think if you have a look at the magazine when it comes out, there's a photo there of what is basically a clean plot. Where the ryegrass pressure was higher, it did a job, commercially useful, but not where you want to be longer term. Yeah, so I think there's a direction there that we've got a couple of candidate herbicides that need more work. That, this is one trial in 1 year, one season in one location. It's going to need more trials over a range of sites, over a range of seasons to get a level of confidence that one, it's going to work, and two, it's not going to hurt the crop.
And are you looking at combinations of the two?
Yeah, I guess where hopefully we'll be at is that Hort Innovation will come up with a project that will go out to tender. It's not something I'll be doing. I'll happily hand it over to someone who does this as their full-time role. But there's a few leads there I think we can look at in terms of working with Secura more closely, and potentially some of the other things could be put on over a low dose, a number of applications, just to try and, but basically to try and explain it. Some of these herbicides are fairly soluble in water, so every time it rains they can leach away and lose their activity. So one way around that, rather than putting one dose on, is to put put a number of smaller doses on just to try and keep the herbicide where you want it in that top layer to control grass without leaching into the root zone of the onion. So I think that's one of the tools that we need to look at. It's not the only tool. As I say, we talk about controlling ryegrass and the rest of the rotation. I think the next step beyond that will be some of this new technology that's coming out, spot spraying machines that will detect grass in onions and be able to spot them as something that's either non-selective without touching the onions, or something that's selective that if they do touch the onions, it doesn't hurt the onions very much. So that'll be the cleanup process potentially.
Talking about rotations, the site that you ran the trial on, the grower there, David, has employed a stale seed bed technique. What's the benefit of that in this context?
Yeah, David's been doing that for a few years. Not necessarily designed to control ryegrass. It's just very effective at controlling weeds generally. So basically, he prepares the ground in the autumn, basically ready to sow, but leaves it, lets it sit and settle. You get weeds germinate over the winter, and you can plant into that. So you've already got a decent weed germination before the onions are planted. You plant into that. You spray it off with like Roundup prior to the onions emerging, and you've given the onions a head start basically on the weed, because older weeds are already germinated. Obviously more keep on coming afterwards, but you're not disturbing the ground much when you plant. So it's a really useful method when done correctly. But one of the keys to it is you have to prepare the soil in the right condition. If you don't prepare the soil in the right condition, if it's too wet particularly, you can end up with problems. So yeah, it's got to be done right. But when it is done right, it's very useful.
And are there particular rotations or break crops that you think can help control the ryegrass seed load? That will, give you some options to really knock it down without harming the onions?
Yeah, I don't think we know enough about what the best rotational mix is. I think that's work in progress. Clearly, there's crops that can be grown that you don't just grow them to control ryegrass. Obviously, farmers are growing them to try and make money, but there are crops that can be grown that you can use herbicides that control ryegrass that are Group 1. So you're taking the pressure off the Group 1s in the rotation.
So is the trick for a lot of these weeds that have resistance to certain chemistries is you've got to mix up the chemistries so they're not overexposed to a single product, and then try every other avenue to reduce the numbers at the same time?
Yep, that's it in a nutshell, basically. Yes. Yep. So, in cereals, there's wheat and barley grown here. There's a number of options in cereals that could be used, and possibly, the opportunity to even spray the cereal crop several times to get as best a control of ryegrass as you can. Any crop that dries off is an opportunity for the ryegrass to go to seed. So, in our cropping rotation, that's cereals. It's poppies. It's pyrethrum. I guess it's onions as well, because they get lifted and the grass dries. Whereas, say, green veg, talking broccoli, cauliflowers, that kind of thing, green peas, there's less of an opportunity for that to happen.
So what's next? Are you going to be doing any more trials?
I will happily handball it on to someone else and again happily provide my advice if they're prepared to listen what I think that we've learnt. So yeah, I think that element we need to continue with the work that we've started, get it to a commercial outcome, and hopefully by that time there'll also be other tools like some of this new technology coming through that is able to spot grass within an onion crop or other crops for that matter. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for your time, Tim.
Well, Tom, no worries. Thank you.
Part of Tim's trial was conducted in collaboration with Dr. Peter Patsalis of Plant Science Consulting as part of the Accelerating the Adoption of Best Management Practices for the Australian Onion Industry project, which is funded by Hort Innovation using the Onion Research and Development Levy and contributions from the Australian Government under project code VN 21000. You've been listening to the VEGALOGUE podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and give the podcast a rating and review. VEGALOGUE is produced by AUSVEG, the peak industry body for Australian vegetable growers. You can find more news and information from AUSVEG at ausveg.com.au, on our social media channels, or in Australian Grower magazine. See you next time.